Hey guys, Rebel Engine 95, recording live from the Luck County Prison Cell. This is a fight I have literally considered doing every week for the last year, and for some reason I today decided to do it. So that's what we're gonna do today. This is King from Tekken, and for simplicity, we're gonna call him Tizoc from Fatal Fury / King of Fighters, SNK. Few things to go over first. There are two characters by the name of King, or two characters with the persona of King. Technically four if you count Armored King. But they're pretty much going to be used interchangeably, unless the situation demands that I address one of them instead of the other. Tizoc is technically, according to the official game, or the official explanation, or whatever his name is, one of the directors or whoever, right? Tizoc and Dinosaur, or King of Dinosaurs, are two separate people, even though it is very heavily suggested, and pretty much every analysis of the characters states that they are the same individual person. So if and when that becomes a thing, I'll talk about that. But yeah, pretty much these are things that don't necessarily affect the fight unless some very specific factors come into play. So we'll start with King. So King was originally a priest who became a professional wrestler. He started out as a kid fighting on the streets, but he became a professional wrestler after founding an orphanage, and he uses the wrestling money to fund the orphanage. This is based off of a Mexican legend of a guy whose name I do not remember, and it was actually the inspiration for King, Tizoc, and Nacho Libre, of all things. It's also based on Tiger Mask, the Japanese wrestler, and I like this episode because it's gonna let me talk a lot about wrestling. Now, the original King fought in the first two Iron Fist tournaments before being killed by Ogre, and then afterwards, one of the orphans that was all of the orphans in King's orphanage were taught his wrestling style, apparently. One of the orphans in the orphanage took up the mantle of King and is still, I believe, the one that's wrestling, that's in the games today. Like I said, both of these two pretty much have the same feats interchangeably. Pretty much I'd say the height of King's feats would be doing a fisherman's buster, carrying somebody, jumping 60 plus feet in the air, and then dropping down. And this is in one of King 2, which is how they're officially referred to as King 1 and King 2. King 2's, one of his ending cutscenes with Marduk, but King 1 actually does it in his ending cutscene after tagging with Armor King in the first Tekken Tag Tournament game, or Tekken Hybrid Tag Tournament, I believe it's called. So both of them are, capable of the same things pretty much. King's wrestling style, I guess, could be described as chain grappling. Though he does clearly have a lot of Japanese influence and a lot of lucha libre influence, which is fitting because he's a Mexican wrestler. Doing things like the Shining Wizard that he refers to as the Tomahawk, or at least the announcer refers to as the Tomahawk. The Fisherman Buster, like I said. Things like atomic drops, suplexes, a lot of submission holds, like arm bars, leg locks, Scorpion Deathlock / Sharpshooter, Cobra Clutch, things like that. If you're not a wrestling fan, none of this really means anything. But he's got a wide arsenal, but he does tend to, even though he is a striking character, he can strike very effectively, he does tend to focus on grappling and submissions and moving from one hold to another. Uh, Arguably getting the hold on and only keeping it until at the point of the most pressure being applied, which is not a bad tactic, even though it's one you never see in wrestling, because it's like, okay, I'm gonna do this move and I'm gonna hold it until they tap out. But like, if the pressure is applied most at one point, why wouldn't you just stop it at the one point and move to something else? So that makes sense. We've seen him fight a Jack 6 that had memorized his entire moveset, so he was able to pretty flawlessly copy moves of other characters like Marduk and Armor King. Yeah, but pretty much he's just a Tekken scaled character with an insane finishing move and a lot of different, and a really vast repertoire. I mean, this is going to be one of those devils in the detail fights, because both of these characters are, even though they are superhuman clearly, they are both human presenting characters. They're not shooting fireballs. They don't have like a described superpower. They're just above human in their abilities. On to Tizoc. Now, Tizoc is a professional wrestler who describes himself as a hero to children, and basically fights for the glory of it. He went on an undefeated streak for a set amount of time before finally losing a match to an actual martial artist. Not to say that he's not a martial artist, but I'm saying like to a kung fu master or something. And actually went on a mission of vengeance to find that martial artist and salvage his reputation. After not finding the martial artist but winning the tournament, he wanted to quit and then realized that he couldn't, because even though he had lost, he still had fans and admirers, and he owed it to them to keep going. Tizoc is a fucking behemoth of a man. To the point where his moveset is completely unreasonable. He's got an exaggerated Hurricane Rana. I forget what it's called. It's like the action something, whatever, where he basically flips, lands on your head, like stands on top of you, and then jumps, and just using his feet grabs you by the neck and backflips with you while holding onto you with his feet, meaning that his jump from your shoulder base, his jump strength is strong enough to pull you along with him while mid backflip, which is insane, right? He's got, he's more of what they refer to as a shoot style wrestler or strong style wrestler, which would mean he's very heavy on kicks, body blocks. He doesn't really like counter or evade anything. He does try to just tank things, which somebody his size, I guess, you can. Very stiff hits and very ugly landings, like body presses and scoop slams and things like that. And then his usually in most cases his finishing move is I believe it's called the Griffin drop or something like that, where he grabs onto you. And when I say grabs onto you, I don't mean he like holds you. He just grabs you, and then he jumps into the air. Again, just holding you, right? He's not like lifting you and jumping. He's holding you, and he jumps, and the escape velocity of his jump pulls you along with him. And then he smashes you against the ceiling, and then usually either choke slams you to the ground or does like an instant drop or something, right? Now you're going to say the ceiling. Well, that's how it looks in the game. Not all of these stages have ceilings, so how do we determine how high he's jumping? Well, his signature stage is in a wrestling dome. Now, if I were one to do calculations, I would say, okay, well, based on the, crowd and the length of the entrance, I can assume this dome is this size and therefore this tall. I didn't do that. I just looked up a famous Japanese wrestling dome. I guess I should have done a Mexican one technically, since he is a Mexican wrestler, but not a big deal. I did the Tokyo Dome. And the Tokyo Dome is 184 feet. Now, part of that is not the ceiling, but from the top of the dome, which is like the roof of the building, which is built above the ceiling. But even if we're scaling it way down, like it might be a smaller arena than the Tokyo Dome, and accounting for the roof, let's scale it down to like 100, right? Which is almost half. So that's like a lot of scaling down I'm doing. So that's not unreasonable for me to say. If we're scaling it down to 100 feet, he is still grabbing a person, not lifting them, just grabbing them, jumping and carrying them with him, and then smashing them against the ceiling 100 feet in the air. So, yeah, that's kind of ridiculous. And then the other thing is that later, after losing again, he decided that in order to, well, again, officially, unofficially, he has a heel persona. In wrestling, a face would be a good guy, a heel would be a bad guy. Unofficially, he has the heel persona of Dinosaur or King of the Dinosaurs, where he incorporates things like bites and whatnot into his moveset. Though the official SNK representatives very heavily not suggest, what's the word? They insist, that's the word. They insist that these are two different characters. Now, they could mean that like the persona of Tizoc, the character of Tizoc, the persona stopped existing, and therefore the individual came up with the new persona of Dinosaur and therefore became like a different person. Wrestling is full of that, where like one character, you stop being one character and you start being another. You reinvent yourself, sort of, but yeah, I don't know if we count that. But let's get into the analysis here, because this is, like I said, this is going to be a relatively simple one, I think. So both of these characters are clearly very above human level, but like I said, they don't have any like described powers. They don't have any like special move, like they don't have any, inhuman abilities, right? I will say, I think King's wrestling style probably would fare a lot better against Tizoc's, because again, for a shoot style, you need sort of like a space to, deliver strikes and whatnot, and King is such a good grappler and such a good chain grappler that he's going to continue, that if he gets a hold of Tizoc, he can throw him around and lock him in and keep on him the whole time, which wouldn't give Tizoc an opportunity to really hit him. Plus, like, again, strong style, you want to be throwing kicks, you want to be throwing chops, clotheslines, things like that. Whereas if you've got a limb trapped in a submission, you can't really kick the guy with that leg, can you? So, I mean, King, I think, has an advantageous repertoire to use against Tizoc. That being said, Tizoc is gigantic compared to King, and it would be a little difficult to, keep a hold of somebody like that. Not to mention, even though both of these characters have superhuman feats, like I said, King is lifting a person and jumping. He's holding on to somebody and then jumping 60 plus feet in the air. He's lifting them over his head, so that's not like nothing. That's obviously ridiculous. But not quite like, having the jump force to carry a person behind you to the point where, just like I said, the velocity of your jump is lifting them into the air 100 feet, so now I don't know that King's is specifically 40, 50 feet. I was just guessing his could be 100 feet as well, but same point of the way they're lifting the people means that Tizoc, at the very least, Tizoc's leg strength is significantly more than King's. And Tizoc has also said that he doesn't care for training his lower body, or at least, sorry, Dinosaur has, but even if Tizoc and Dinosaur are different characters, they're clearly nearly identical in moveset and what they're capable of doing, so it's at least fair to compare Tizoc to a description of Dinosaur. Dinosaur saying that he doesn't like doing leg training and he mostly focuses on upper body, would mean that if anything, Tizoc's physically stronger with his arms than he would be with his legs. So if the weakest part of his body is letting him jump 100 feet in the air, that says a lot about the rest of him. Also, another thing to keep in mind is that King 2, has been through a lot more of the Iron Fist tournaments than King 1, because King 1 died after the second one. And King 2 has fought characters like Marduk and Steve Fox, who's a genetically engineered super soldier, and in some incarnations was the experiment for the G cell and everything. But I think officially it was the experiment for the devil gene, or an attempt at replicating the devil gene. So he's fought superhuman characters as well, but the Tizoc, even if we count just Tizoc, he's been through at least he was on an undefeated streak for most of his career before entering the 4 SNK tournaments, meaning he was, he had a long wrestling career before entering those 4 tournaments. Now, technically, King 2 would, have more experience than him at that point. But if you throw Dinosaur in there, depending on if you believe that to be the case or not, that would give Tizoc a total of 9 or 10 tournament appearances against, equally, if not more, superhuman opponents than King was fighting, like the Jack 6 and Steve. So, not only is Tizoc completely outclassing King in terms of strength and size, but also experience in that regard. I think that's probably the edge that's needed. Like I said, King 2's fighting style is going to give him an advantage and probably let him, last a lot longer and let him, have a fighting chance. Because again, being able to pick the leg, being able to get you in leg lock so he can't kick you, getting, an arm up, but against somebody that much bigger, stronger, and who's also no slouch in wrestling himself, I don't think it's really going to work out well. I think that, eventually this would go to Tizoc. Yeah. But again, very close fight. Fight I've been meaning to do for a while, and I think it would be a cool episode to see, especially because both of these do, I believe, have 3D models, right? King obviously in Tekken has a 3D model, and then I think Dinosaur has a 3D model. I don't think Tizoc specifically, the Griffin mask Tizoc does, but yeah, that's how I think it would go. So anyway, Verbal Engine 95. See ya.